Hello everyone, and welcome to the Unreal Engine portion of my demo series. So we're going to learn how to import your assets, how to import your texture maps, and how to build your materials in Unreal here. We'll also learn about master materials and instancing as well. So to start, I've opened the Unreal editor here, and we're just going to go to Games. You can pick blank, first person, third person, entirely up to you. If this was a larger scene, I'd pick third or first person, just because then I can put myself in the scene to make sure that the scale fits right, and you can kind of play through and check it out. As we're just doing like a single prop staging in this one, I'm just going to go with blank. So if you look at your project defaults on the right, you want to make sure you're on Blueprint and not on the C#. So Blueprint is the visual scripting. And then I've got ray tracing turned off specifically because it takes a lot longer for it to load and build things with ray tracing, especially with like building your lighting and compiling shaders and stuff like that. So I've left it off simply for the sake of speeding things up as I do this demo. You can put starter content on if you want or not. It is entirely up to you. You do get some basic materials and textures with it. You can always add it later. So I'm actually just going to leave it off for mine. And so if you look at the bottom, you can pick your project location, which I'm just going to put back in my demos folder that we made earlier. And then change your project name. Hit create, and we'll just give it a couple seconds to load here. And so, as we can see, we start off with a error message here, which I will get to in a moment. So first thing, your motion controls. Again, same as Maya, you can hit F to focus and zoom in on an object. I just selected one of the landscape panels here. But so if you hit right click, you rotate around in place. Clicking the middle mouse wheel lets you pan, which you can't really see it a whole lot just because the default scene they give us is really big. So in order to like adjust how quickly we can move around the scene, if you look in the top right corner, we've got camera speed. So I'm going to set that up. Let's go with 8. I think it's a very big scene, so that's a bit better. So yes, clicking the middle mouse wheel lets you pan around. Clicking the left mouse button, if you move forward or up and down with your mouse, it moves in and out, and left and right rotates. Additionally, if you hold Alt and use the middle mouse or the right mouse button, sorry, you can zoom in and out as well that way. There is another way to control things in Unreal though, as these controls that I've just laid out are kind of confusing and unintuitive. If you hold the right mouse button, you can then use W, A, S, and D to move around as though you were in a first-person shooter. Q and E move you down and up. And I found this is the best way, the way that feels the most intuitive for moving around in Unreal. So now that we've got kind of our basics for our control, we're going to deal with our workspace. And so as you can see, I've got my outliner in the top right here. So this will show me everything that's in my scene. And then in the bottom right, we've got our details panel. So this is kind of like the attributes panel in Maya, only much more useful. You'll notice every menu in Unreal has a search bar, which saves you so much time. So get into the habit of using those. And so we're going to adjust our workspace a bit more here. And we're going to bring out our content drawer. So you see in the bottom left corner, it says content drawer here. I personally don't like when it kind of comes up and down like this. So if you hit dock in layout on the right side here, it pops it out into its own little bar. And then we can bring that to the bottom and choose where we want to dock it. I want mine to run right along the bottom like this. And then I'm going to adjust my details panel so that it actually runs along the right side. Nope, that's not where I want it. There's a lot of fiddling about to kind of get it to sit where you want. Okay, that will do it. I'll make it smaller, and I'll pull my outliner out and let that take the top half there. There we go. So you'll notice that this content browser, right now we don't have anything in it, which is great. This is what we want to start with. But your content browser is the exact same as your file explorer in Windows. So if I bring my demos folder in here and I go into the Unreal Engine one, it's got all your folders in there, but we go to content. And if we click down here into our content browser and create a new folder, I'm going to title this one Meshes. It would help if I could spell properly. And then when we look in our content browser, or in our file explorer, we can see we've created the meshes folder. Additionally, if we go into our file folder and we create one here, it gets created in our content browser. And so it's very useful to remember this, because then things that you've exported from Maya, for instance, you can just click and drag from one folder to another. So for instance, we've got all of our FBXs here that we exported from Maya. So we're going to take our barrel low, just drop it in, and then I'm going to undo that. We want to copy and paste, and then we're going to bring that in. And you'll see Unreal gives us a message here saying a new source content file has been detected and we'd like to import it. So I'm going to say don't ask again, and we'll do it automatically, and we'll hit import. Most of the default settings for your import are going to be fine, particularly if you're using static meshes. A couple things you do want to watch out for is in the mesh setting, if you go under advanced, there is a setting here that says combine meshes. And so when we did our barrel in Maya, we exported it as a group, and it had 3 separate pieces for the main body, the top lid, and the bottom lid. And so in order to make them all the same thing in Unreal, we're going to hit combine meshes. And then when we import, they'll all be just one single mesh. and we won't have to worry. If we don't hit that, then we have three separate pieces that we then have to try to piece together and line up again in Unreal Engine. Um, Additionally, if you go down to the materials section of your import box, you will see the material import method and create new materials. We do not want to create new materials, because what that'll do is it'll read whatever material ID you have on your mesh, which will likely be a Lambert, or for the instance where we color ID'd the one barrel, then it would make two new Lamberts or two new materials with those names, which we're going to build our own materials. So we don't want it creating a new material every time we import an object, and it's just going to fill up our folder with a bunch of stuff we don't want and we'll have to delete later. And then we can just hit import all. Sometimes you will get error messages like this. This is not a big deal. I just didn't have the smoothing groups checked when I exported. So we're fine on that. That's not a big worry. But then if we'll look, we have our barrel low here. Additionally, instead of moving from one to another, we can just take from our Maya folder and then just drag and drop it into our content browser. And then again, we're going to make sure we've got our combine meshes is turned on, and we are not creating new materials. It generally saves your settings each time you use this import window, so it's pretty safe to just click OK. And again, I didn't have smoothing group turned on, but not a big deal. So one thing you will notice is this little star on the meshes that we just brought in. So a star means that it is unsaved. So you can select the barrel, hit Control S, it saves it. Additionally, you can have nothing selected, hit Control Shift and S, and it will save everything that you've got. And that's really, for bringing in a static mesh, that's it. It's as simple as that. So now we're going to go to our materials folder, and in here we're actually going to create another folder that we're going to title Texture Swatches. And so this is going to be where we send all of our texture maps that we export from Substance Painter. Additionally, with this content browser being the exact same thing as your file explorer, when you export from Maya, you can export, instead of going to your assets folder in Maya, you can export directly into the Unreal Engine folder. So when I exported in Maya, I just selected this assets folder in our project folder. If I'd had the Unreal file set up at the time, I could have just gone here, content and meshes, and just exported them directly to this folder as well. And you can do the same thing with your texture swatches and materials. So straight from Substance Painter into Unreal Engine. Which, if you're doing it that way and like you have to go back to Substance Painter to tweak one of your settings or some of your textures, and then you hit export again, it'll just go straight to your Unreal Engine folder, overwrite the previous textures, and it will update all your materials on your objects automatically. You don't have to worry about doing anything yourself. It's quite great. But we're going to go back because I didn't do that earlier as we didn't have the Unreal Engine folder set up. And we're going to go into our source images and drag and just drag and drop. And it automatically imports them in here. For this one, we've only got a few maps, so I'm just putting them all in the same folder. I would recommend creating new folders for each object or for each texture set. Otherwise, you'll have, a mass of all these images here. And if you didn't name them properly when you were exporting them, it'll be super hard to figure out what is what. Go. And that is all it takes to import our meshes and our texture maps. And so again, you can see I've got all the little stars here because they were all imported and we haven't saved it yet. So Control Shift S, and we've saved them all. So another thing you want to do in Unreal when you're setting up your scene is check the lighting. So in this, the directional light acts as your sunlight. So you can hit Control and L in your scene, and you can control what angle this sunlight comes from. If you go down into your Details panel, which is just below our outliner here, I have to actually make sure I select the directional light. But here we can adjust our intensity, our color. We can change the angle here. Sorry, that's the source angle. So it kind of changes the level of detail. You can see on the right side how my shadow kind of fades out there. Big thing to remember in Unreal Engine is to not ignore this Details panel. It's got every setting you need for everything that you could possibly select, and it is incredibly useful. So you want to make sure that your scene has not only these default directional light, height fog, sky atmosphere, skylight, and volumetric cloud. The sky sphere you actually don't need to worry about too much here. But you want to have what's called a post-processing volume also added to your scene. And so it's kind of hard to see on this scene, but Unreal Engine changes the strength of your lighting dependent upon where the camera is. So if the camera is in the shadows, it will change the rest of the lighting. And then when you move out into the light, so like if you're inside of a box and we came out, you'd see that the light would suddenly get very bright. And then it would kind of take a second for it to readjust. And almost like it tries to mimic our eyes when we go from darkness to light. But when you're trying to actually light your scene and set things, this is incredibly annoying because, if your camera is here versus here, you will get different lighting effects on different aspects of your scene. So I'm going to search because this is all the default. Let's see. Okay, they don't have it already in the scene. So we're going to go over to our place actors and we're going to look for a post-process volume and then just drag and drop that into our scene. And so you can see it popped up here in our outliner. And so we want to select it and go down to our details, which you can see there are a whole ton. So the first thing you want to do is look for infinite extend unbound. And so what this does is our post-process volume in the scene is this cube. But we want it to affect the whole scene, not just what's in the cube. You can use multiple post-process volumes, and you can use them to create different effects for like chromatic aberration and different lighting and color mixing and balancing effects. There's quite a bit you can do with it. For right now, all we want to do is turn on this infinite extend unbound. So that means it affects our entire scene uniformly. And then we're going to go to the exposure settings. And you can see here they've got min and max EV. So we're going to turn both of those on, and we're going to set them both to 1, which you can see it drastically changed how my lighting worked in the scene, which we can simply, adjust that in with our actual directional light settings. We can turn up our brightness here. But by turning on, setting that max and minimum EV to 1, we've made our lighting uniform across the entire scene. This makes things a million times easier when you're trying to see exactly how your textures look, exactly how all your lighting reflects off of it and everything like that. So with those set up and with our meshes already brought in, we're going to start creating our materials. Okay, so to build our materials, we're just going to right-click. We're in our materials folder, so we're going to right-click and create a new material. And I always preface everything or use prefixes in Unreal. Additionally, you can't use any spaces in your descriptions in Unreal. You have to use underscores or camel case things. And so I'm just going to call this matte barrel. So if we double click here, we get this extra box, or this options box with a material graph inside. So we're going to go and we're going to I'll grab the 3 maps from our non-color ID'd barrel. And we're going to drag those in. And then I'm going to make this full screen here. When you're in your graph editor, so middle mouse wheel zooms in and out, right click to grab and pan, and then just left click to move everything around. So we've got, this is our base color, our diffuse map. This one's our normal, and then this one is our triple packed. So what it does is it packs, as I explained in our Substance Painter demo, we've got our ambient occlusion is on the red channel, our roughness is on the green, and metallic is on the blue. So we're going to pull those out and just connect them here. So one for each. And then our diffuse comes from the RGB to base color, and then our normal goes again from the RGB to our normals. So I'm going to, oops, I minimized by accident. This one. So we're going to hit Control S, save our barrel material. And then if we go back to our meshes, this is the one with no color ID. Again, I'm going to hit F to focus. Oof, that's right. And I forgot I had my camera speed turned way up, so let's just turn that back down to 1. There we go, it's a bit more manageable. Additionally, if you hold Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out with a bit more control than using the WASD method. But let's back out a little bit. So we've got our barrel here now, and if we go to our materials, we can drag our barrel material and then just drop it on our barrel. You'll notice it's much more shiny here than it was in Substance Painter, and that is because they use different renderers. So going from Substance Painter back to either Unreal or Maya, it's going to look different and you're going to have to adjust it. And so in order to make adjustments, I'm just taking a look at our barrel here. So in order to make adjustments, we're just going to double click on our barrel, zoom out a bit, and then we're going to double click on our barrel material in our content browser, and then we're going to add some things to this graph. So our color is pretty good as it is, but say we did want to adjust it so we have a couple different variations or slight variations on the color. We're going to hold 3 and left click, and it gives us a triple vector. So this triple constant. And this constant can be used for a couple different things. Like for instance, it says X, Y, and Z value here. So we can use it to control those locations or those values in the scene. But we can also use it to control the color. And so I'm actually going to set this to flat white. And then in order to make it interact, we're going to have to multiply these together. So we're going to hit M for multiply and then left click. Additionally, you can hit Tab and then just enter and search for whatever you want. So multiply or a constant. So you've got constant, constant 2 vector, and constant 3 vector, which is what we just made here. The hotkeys for any of the vectors, so 1 gives you a single, 2 and left click gives you a double, and 3 and left click gives you this one, or gives you the triple. I'm just going to delete all of those because we don't need them. And so now we're going to multiply our colors together. So we'll put this one in the B value and move this one to the A. And then from our A, we go out to our base color. So as you can see in our shader ball here, looks exactly the same because we're multiplying it by white. However, now if we take this, we can adjust our values. It doesn't change in real time. You have to kind of like adjust it and then give it a second to load. But we can change how all of our tones work and everything like that. Again, I'm going to set us back to flat 0 for everything, just so we're seeing the actual true colors. And so this multiplication principle follows across all of our textures. So with our ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic, these are all grayscale maps. So really, you're only adjusting a 0 to 1 value. So we're going to use that to our advantage. And so I brought in a single constant, just 1 and left click, and then a multiply node of M and left click. And so I'll do our roughness first, just because it's the easiest to see on our little shader ball here. You can see how shiny that looks. So we're going to go from our roughness to the A value, and then from our single constant to the B value, and then we're going to plug that in there. And so setting the default value at 1 means that this is the same. So the exact amount of roughness and the roughness map that's coming out here doesn't get altered at all as it goes in, because we've got it at 1. If we set it to 0 roughness, then we can see we've got it's much shinier, almost to the point where it looks like it's glass, or there's a layer of glass on it. Set it back to 1, we get what we had, but let's 0.1, sorry. Back to 1, that's what we had originally, but now we set it to 2 or 3 or 10. And you can see we're losing that shininess all on here. And we'll set it back to 1. So this allows us to change and adjust our textures when we're in Unreal Engine. And then since our ambient occlusion and our metallic are going to be the exact same, I'm just going to bring in a couple of these and a couple of these. So for our ambient occlusion, and again, our default value, we always want to set that to 1, because then we know we're not changing anything in our scene here. This is what our default texture is going to be, because we want to actually look at our object in the scene when we're adjusting these to see, where things are. And then the last one we have is our metallic. And just hold Alt and left click to disconnect one if you need to. But one thing you also notice is that this multiply value by 1 is, it's already built into the multiply node. You don't technically need another node to change that value. If I change it to 0 or to 10, this is the metallic value, so we're not actually going to see a lot of difference. But it will function the same. We plug in this constant node because we're going to turn it into a parameter that we can change in the detail settings later. But for now, let's get some order to this a bit. Let's pull these here. So we've got all of our roughness, ambient occlusion, and metallic connected. And so now let's do the normals. And so we can adjust the strength of the normals using Unreal Engine, but we have to use this flatten normal node. And so we're going to pull out from the RGB into the normal, which says V3. So we know it's a triple vector, which means that it's going to be a color map. And then out of our result into the normal. And then we need another constant value for this. But you'll notice that this is flatten normal. And because it's a flatten, we actually want our default value to be a -1. And so this puts us at the exact amount where our where we have it in our actual map and where it looked in Substance Painter. But because it flattens normal, if we go to a positive value, you can see how that became very shiny. We lost all of our detail and all of our depth. So let's change it to back to the -1. You can see we've got our depth back, but we can go -2 and increase the power. -5, increase the power of them even more. And you can see how much more of that detail kind of like comes out and how much deeper it looks. So I'm going to set this back to -1 as our base. And then we're going to hit Control S and save our barrel material. So now we've got this big grid that looks somewhat confusing, but hopefully I've explained things well enough for you there. So this is the basics of creating a texture in Unreal Engine. But if you create a texture like this for every single asset, you're going to end up having a very high texture budget. And it's going to use a lot more of your graphics processing than you need it to. So what we're actually going to do is convert this into a master material instead. And so a master material is going to include all of our settings in the details panel over here on the right side. But then we're going to instance that material. And so calling on the instance takes less processing power and takes less from your graphics processing than calling on an actual full material does. So I'm actually going to close this, and then I'm going to rename this as our master material. So that says mat_master material. So we're going to go in here, and then all those different constants that we added, those are all now going to become parameters that we can change. So we're actually going to do it with our texture samples as well. So we right click and we go convert to parameter. And then this is our base color map, which we can also call our diffuse map. And then if you see on the left side here, it gives us all the details for this node that we've selected. So we can change the parameter name here if we forgot to do it there. We're also going to create a group for this. So there are none here by default. So we're just going to write in our own, and we're going to call this group texture maps. Can I use a space? Yes, we can use a space for this. And then we're going to do that for all of our maps. And now when we hit on our group here, we've got texture maps here because we created that group. And then change to our texture maps again. So we've got all of our maps are done. These are all parameters now. And what the parameter is going to do is it will allow us to change those settings in the details here. So we're going to click on our master material and then create a material instance, which I always prefix for MI, barrel, no ID. And so when we double click and open this, you'll see it's quite different from our master material graph. And I'm not seeing my parameters here. Let's close these. That's why I didn't save it. There we go. There we go. Yeah, I just forgot to save it. So now we can see that we've got our texture maps here. And so for every instance that we create, we can change these texture maps. And so we just click the little checkbox, and then we can go to our texture swatches folder and then just drag and drop them in here. Additionally, if you don't want to sort through your textures folder, you can just hit the little down arrow and then search for whichever new map you want to add. And keep in mind, we only have the barrel for this one scene, but you can create material instances of this master material for every single object in your scene, because this is going to give us the ability to change out all of those base maps. You just have to turn them off or on. And so we're going to leave that one for now. I'm just going to close it because we still need to make some more changes to our master material. So we've set it so now that we have parameters for these, we can change all of these settings. But let's do the same to all the other nodes that we brought in. So this one acts as a hue shift. So we'll just call it that. And then we're going to set our default value at white. And then we're going to create a new group. And I'm going to call this adjustment parameters. So, and then let's do the same for all the rest of our constants that we brought in. So this one goes, so ambient occlusion, roughness metallic, which I just realized I mistitled this. So remember AORM as your abbreviation for this triple pact. So AORM, ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, and it goes in the order. So red, ambient occlusion, green, roughness, B, metallic. I find it's the easiest way to remember. So let's see, this one's roughness. So let's convert this to a parameter. Roughness intensity. And let's change our group to adjustment parameters. Let's do the same for the one above it. This is our ambient occlusion. And as I said before, metallic is more often than not, it's 0 or 1. It's very rare you're actually going to change this metallic intensity. So you can choose not to have it there. I always put it there. Even if you decide not to put it there and you realize you need it later, anything you come back and change in this master material is copied into the existing instances. So you don't have to worry about like having to redo your instances or anything like that if you change this material. And for our normal intensity, you'll see I added flatten in the brackets after our title, just so that people are aware that this material, or that this is using the flatten normal node, so that they know to use negative values. And again, put this into our adjustment parameters layer. And Control S. We save our material. So this is the very base minimum. You'll notice like I'm not using opacity on this. I'm not using emissive, but very easily we can. It's just a matter of like, for emissive, for instance, just add a 3 value, a 1, and a multiply. And plug in our emissive. And then let's make this white. And you'll see our value is at 0, but what this value will do now is change the intensity. Which overrides the color that we have there. Additionally, I just used a triple constant for this, but your emissive will run exactly the same as your diffuse color setup, with the exception of this extra parameter for intensity. I'm going to delete these. We don't need them at all right now in our scene. And you can actually see that adaptive eye, what's the word I'm looking for? Which is totally eluding me right now. working here on our shadow ball when we took off the emissive. You saw it got like very dark and then became our regular light or our regular colors. So now that we've got our material, master material all set up, we don't need to actually change any of these settings because these are all the maps that we want for this. I'm going to hit Control S just to save, Control Shift S to save everything. And so before I clicked and dragged and dropped our material onto our object, which, it's fine when you have one asset in your scene. But what if I'd had, 5 of them or 100? So now I'm going to have to drag and drop every single one. But that's doing things the slow way. What we can do is we can just double click on our barrel, and this gives us basically the default panel for this object. And so if we change which material is applied to this object in this default panel, then every time we drag that material into the scene, it's going to already be textured for us. So you'll see over here on the right where it says element 0 and world grid. So this is our material. It says material slots here. So this is the material that's currently on it. It's just the world grid material. So now we can go down here and grab our material instance and just drop it on here. Additionally, if you don't want to sort through the content browser, we can just click here and then we get a search bar, which I highly recommend getting into the habit of using this search barrel or this search window, because then you can just have this full screened and just work away. You're fine. You don't need to keep going back to the content browser and back up here. Just cuts down a lot of that back and forth and saves you some time. So now in our scene, I'm going to select that, delete. We're going to go back to our meshes, and now you can see in our content browser we're already textured because we applied it in here. So now every time we drag in our barrel, it's got those settings, or it's got that texture applied to it. So now, but we did have an issue where, this is way too shiny. This looks very wet for some reason. Because as I said, Unreal Engine, Maya, and Substance Painter all use different renderers. So we're going to adjust our roughness intensity here. And you can see real time in the scene, it is changing for us. So I'm going to go with 0.5. You'll notice this little arrow. This will always reset to the default. So whatever default you set for the master material, wrong buttons, whatever default value you set in these is going to be what it'll reset to if you hit this. So let's put our roughness at half. That looks a bit better. It's, the wood's still a little bit shiny, metal's still a little bit shiny, but we don't really look fully like we're wet and glossy. Maybe let's bring it down a little bit more. Let's also adjust our normals. Let's go with -2. You can see that it's just a slight change. It's not a lot of change. You have to kind of know what you're looking for. If you go too far, you will start to see it kind of fuzz out there. So I'm actually going to go -1.5. And we'll call that one good. And let's play with the hue shift a bit. This looks a bit cartoony. So let's bring over a bit more of a red. Let's bring that down a bit. And just so you can see how the hue shift kind of functions there. with ambient occlusion. Aerial map is not making a huge difference on this object. So I'm just going to reset that back to default and leave it. And so now same as before, so I shouldn't say same as before. So let's, oh, that's why I haven't created a map yet. There we go. I have to actually save the level itself because you'll see it says demo stage here, which is this level. You can right click and create multiple levels within the same project. That's all it was asking me to save there. But if we go back, so if we go back into our materials here, and remember what I said about, creating, using the hue shift to create slight variations. Oof. Actually, I'm going to adjust that normal. I do not like how that is looking. And I shifted that's why. Set that at 6. There we go. That looks better. Um, so yeah, what I said about using the same texture to make different variations. So let's create another instance, and we're going to name this one same thing as the other. I just added a 2 to the end. So for this one, we're going to drag and drop this material on our second barrel. And you can see this one has the default settings. So everything is, it looks a little bit different. Everything is what it was set at in our instance, or in our master material here. Let's just turn on our hue shift. Let's make this one a bit darker. And again, our roughness looks weird. So let's turn our roughness up. We can change the metallic intensity. The slider wheel will change it to weird values. Going below 0 doesn't actually do anything. Let's leave this one at 2 just so it has a bit more difference from the other one. There we go. So now our barrels, 2 slightly different barrels, but all using the same masks, or the same material maps. So this is for our first one, but now we've still got our color ID'd version. So we're going to create another instance of our original master material. And so I just named this barrel ID wood. Oops. going to double click, and this time we are going to change these maps. So again, we can open our content browser and pull them out of here, or we can just search here. And so we've got our, is this the base color? Oh, no, this is our AORM. Barrel, AORM. And then our ID for our, oh, now this one's our diffuse. Barrel ID wood base color. And then our ID wood normal. And this doesn't look any different than the previous ones because we just exported the same materials. We just copied them over, if you remember from the Substance Painter demo. But let's say this is, this would be a different material, well, a different texture. So I'm going to Control S to save. And we'll go to our meshes, and we've got our barrel low ID. And so this is, I've just opened both here. You can see this one, it's just the barrel low. This is the one that we did that doesn't have color IDing on it. So it's just got this one material slot that held the original Lambert in it. If we go over to the one that we did that does have color ID, now you can see it's got two slots. And you can see the slot name, ID steel and ID wood. This is what we named our Lamberts when we were in Maya. And so from here, we can just click and select, ID wood. Oops, I put it in the wrong slot. Don't do that. Wood. And I didn't create a steel one, but because of all our UVs and everything are the same, I can just apply. And so that's what the color IDing does and is used for. Like I've said before, this is total overkill on this object. But if you do have a larger, more complicated object, like you're doing an entire building, you can have a bunch of different element slots in the building. And then save everything. And if I bring this in, it looks exactly like this one does. Let's actually, for our steel, let's go with no ID 2. And so you can see I've taken the wood from the first instance and the steel from the second instance, and I've applied them on here. So one more thing before we go, I realized I didn't show you guys anything to do with opacity. So this is how you would do things for opaque solid objects. But say you had something that was glass in your scene. First thing, I highly recommend using a separate material master for anything with opacity. Unreal doesn't particularly like to mix and match opacity or not. You can do it using a mask, but for this purpose, I'm just going to use a new material. And so we're just going to call it opacity, and then we're going to double click to open. So first, I called it opacity, but this is just our base material. And so if you go over to the left in your details panel, down in material, you see blend mode. And so we're going to change blend mode from opaque to translucent. And then I'm just going to bring in, use 3 and 1, and just going to bring in a color, just so we're not looking at the black thing. And then we can plug into our base color and our opacity. So 0 in our opacity, it's completely invisible. 0.5, we're halfway. 1 is fully opaque. So this is all well and good, but you'll notice our material node has actually removed a lot of these options for us. And so, it's very rare that you're going to have something that's just opacity without having roughness on it, for instance. So if we go back over to our detail section and we scroll down, you'll get the lighting mode here, which is by default set to volumetric non-directional. So if we change this to surface translucency volume, we can see it brings back in all of our other map settings. So then if I bring in something for the roughness, now we're actually starting to look like we've got a glass ball of some kind, that we can see through here. And again, as you can see, if I change my roughness, it changes what our ball looks like. And so really, that's all you need for opacity is this. If you had something that does have parts that are opaque and parts that aren't, you can bring in your map like we did with all of our other materials, because when you export, you'll actually get one of these maps will be an opacity mask, which will just be a black and white map. And then we can tie that in together the same with the same as we did for our other materials. So the same as we did it for this. So we just tie in, our opacity mask would be here, and then we multiply it by a constant so that we have a value, and then just plug it into our opacity section. But yeah, just wanted to make sure I covered that for anyone that does need to do, oops, save that, for anyone that does need to have something like glass in their scene. So this is the one with the color ID that we've changed, so we have the different versions or the different materials on it. But for instance, I replace the steel. Super quick and simple. And then, oops, let's go to our materials. We open our opacity material. S. And there we can see that now our bands are see-through. Particularly you can see at the sides there. So yeah, hopefully that covers everything that you folks need to start staging your scenes in Unreal. I haven't gone into any of the blueprinting or anything like that, but if there's any interest, please let me know. I'd be happy to do so. Same way as I didn't really touch too much on the lighting, which I can cover that in another video as well if people would like. Just let me know. All right, thank you, and I'll see you in my next video where I show you how to build all our shaders in Maya.